big welcome to, I think we have something like 74 participants on our Zoom today. So it will obviously be something that we won't be able to have very much interaction about, but I hope that you will enjoy it. It's a special occasion for us, as I say, in these unusual times. And we want to welcome all those who've gone to the trouble to connect with us, our supporters, our funders, our partners and friends, volunteers, befrienders, interns, and our pro bono supporters, auditors and barristers. And especially we welcome our guest today, Minister Darragh O'Brien. There you are. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate very much you coming and giving us your time today, because as Minister of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, you are a busy man. So thank you very much for coming with us today. Our annual report tells the story of the activities of the year of 2019. It reflects our accountability as a company, as a charity, and as a registered law centre to the civil authorities. It also provides, hopefully, a succinct account of the use of funds to those who support us financially so generously. And it's also a source of information to those who come to seek the help or seek information about the activities of Mercy Law. In 2019, we assisted nearly 500 clients with legal advice of one phase or another. So in a nutshell, the report, which we're launching today, describes the nature and scope of the free legal service provided to people who are facing homelessness or the risk of it, a situation that's often accompanied by helplessness and hopelessness. The report describes the effort of the centre to draw attention to the circumstances of people in these situations and of the inadequacy in many ways of current public policies and procedures in responding to people who are in deep distress. The report also draws our attention to the distress which we have encountered in the last year, not just over the last 10 years or more, and which has continued into 2020 and worsened, of course, under the circumstances of the pandemic. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of this dimension of our society is the number of children who are experiencing seriously damaging accommodation circumstances, sometimes even being in tents or cars. And it is almost unthinkable how they will look back a few years from now on circumstances that they have experienced and wonder how it could have been. So we must not be blind and deaf to the circumstances of some of our most vulnerable brothers and sisters. And Mercy Law, as hopefully you will see, is committed to helping people and to restoring hope for their lives. So with that, I want to hand over to our Managing Solicitor, Rebecca Keating, who will now give us an overview of that service and of its efforts to defend and to advocate for people affected by homelessness in our society. Rebecca.
Many thanks, Selina, and many thanks to you all for tuning in and for bearing with us and for showing your support of Mercy Law at this challenging time. We're most grateful to you, Minister, for kindly accepting our invitation to launch formally this report today and for joining us. As Helena said, we know you're extremely busy. Before I formally introduce the Minister, I just want to speak for a few minutes about the work of Mercy Law in 2019. Highlight our work in the context of the pandemic and also raise some urgent concerns we have in areas that we see the need for urgent reform. As many of you know, Mercy Law offers much needed legal services to people who are homeless or who are at risk of homelessness. Our legal advice and representation service is designed to be flexible, accessible and impactful. We identify groups in particular need of assistance and bring our service to them through outreach clinics. Our service exists in part because state legal aid is not generally available in housing and homeless matters. Our legal support extends beyond the individual to organisations and professionals supporting people at risk of homelessness. We offer expert legal advice, which is free and is at the end of a phone call. We also use our expertise in our training sessions that run frequently throughout the year. Our policy work is completely grounded in our casework. We take the first-hand experiences of our clients and advocate for changes that will bring broader improvement beyond the individual situation. Our fifth and final service is our befriending service, which provides invaluable practical help and emotional supports for our clients. In 2019, we remodeled this service and welcomed a number of new befrienders who are kindly volunteering their time to support our clients. This service is a really important complement to our legal service. Our befrienders provide continuity of contact, practical advice, and emotional support to our clients who are all in some transition in their lives. In October last year, following 8 consecutive months of homeless figures surpassing 10,000, the number of people homeless in Ireland peaked at 10,514. As Helena mentioned there, staggeringly, nearly 4,000 of those were children. Unsurprisingly, our office was extremely busy in 2019, responding to the needs of the many people experiencing homelessness and housing adversity. Overall, we provided free legal advice and representation to 1,611 individuals during the course of that year, including nearly 500 homeless families. We worked with people who were stressed, upset, and who at times were desperate. And throughout our work, we maintained our ethos of treating everyone with respect, compassion, and kindness. Like in previous years, it was ethnic minorities who were particularly in need of our service and who presented with the most urgent and complex needs. We responded to this need, for example, by piloting a new outreach clinic for members of the traveller community in partnership with Exchange House Ireland National Traveller Service. In the pilot period, September to December, we supported 50 families through that clinic and partnership. Partnership is very much at the core of our approach, and we're very grateful to all our clinic partners for their support. And we're also delighted in 2019 to continue our partnership with A&O Goodbody Solicitors, who support vulnerable homeless clients through our Focus Ireland clinic. Rachel and Blessing, both Mercy Law clients in 2019, very generously share their experience of working with Mercy Law in our annual report that we're launching today. Rachel came to us last year unable to access the social housing list because the local authority contended she didn't have sufficient connection to the local area. Rachel had been in treatment in Dublin for 6 months and was terrified of returning to her home area. She was at risk of a relapse back into addiction and at risk from an ex-partner. We were able to work with Rachel and evidence her connections to Dublin and clearly articulate how the law should be applied in her case. Rachel was delighted when she was then accepted onto the housing list and was able to move on with her life and move into a new home. We're very happy to hear that Rachel had a baby in April of this year, and we wish her all the very best in her new home with her young family. Blessing's story was one of chronically insecure emergency accommodation. She was put into what is known as the one night only emergency accommodation provision and had to move every day with her 4 children. As she says in the report, "I was destitute and alone and had no one to rely on." Our intervention secured stable accommodation where her family could settle and rebuild. It was on these very urgent and distressing issues for homeless families that our policy work focused in 2019. We brought the experiences of clients like Blessing to the Oireachtas Committee on Housing in June 2019. Many of the TDs, some of the TDs on that committee had not heard of this practice of one night only emergency accommodation for families. They were deeply shocked, and rightly so. We were most encouraged when the committee's report, published in November of 2019, made an unequivocal recommendation to cease this form of emergency accommodation provision. That recommendation has now been implemented. We're happy to have played our part together with other organisations in bringing this practice to an end. But there are still several issues that remain unaddressed for homeless families, and we would appreciate, Minister, if you could give these your urgent attention. Families are still spending too long in a completely inappropriate emergency accommodation, in B&Bs and hotels far from the supports that they need. We're currently, for example, working with a family who've been in B&B accommodation for nearly 3.5 years. In our report on the lived experiences of homeless families published in December 2019, we brought our clients' words and experiences to the fore. We highlighted the failure of our homeless system to meet families' needs, to treat them in a separate and distinct way, as was promised in Rebuilding Ireland, the previous government's action plan on housing. That report also shares the trauma wrought on a family when they were refused emergency accommodation by a local authority, when they have to sleep on floors, in overcrowded caravans, or worse still, as Helena mentioned, in cars or parks because no one will accommodate them. And you may well be aware, Minister, that this is very much a current concern, even in the midst of this pandemic. In recent months, we have supported a number of vulnerable families who have been refused homeless supports and have had absolutely nowhere to go. The only option left to sleep rough. And we're very concerned about a possible change of policy by local authorities in the Dublin area, as yet unpublished, in relation to the homeless assessment. And we're looking for transparency and a review of the decision-making process in these cases. These situations are really unacceptable. Children should not be sleeping in parks. And we will all agree that there is definitely a better way. We therefore ask the Minister to look at the recommendations in our family homelessness report and to act on them. These are not controversial and you'll be very familiar with them. They are in fact nearly included in full in the joint Oireachtas Committee on Housing report, and the Minister sat on that committee, so he'll be very familiar with that report. And we would very much welcome your prioritisation of reform of the homelessness legislation to take out the discretion on local authorities and to place a duty on them to provide homeless accommodation for presenting families. Just to mention the context of COVID, like everybody, the impact of COVID has dominated our work in 2020. We all had deep anxieties about the health and well-being of our clients in those early weeks of the pandemic. And we'd like to commend the engagement of several local authorities who responded quickly to the requests to move some of the families we worked with out of chronically overcrowded settings into more suitable accommodation. And we hope this approach can be sustained. We also welcomed the emergency legislation that imposed a ban on evictions. We ran a very well-attended webinar to analyse and explain those provisions of that legislation and responded to several queries from affected individuals. And while we absolutely acknowledge the need for emergency legislation in the unprecedented early stages of this pandemic, we would caution the new government against enactment of provisions that have not undergone proper legislative scrutiny. Such scrutiny improves the quality, clarity and enforceability of such legislation to the benefit of all. A welcome distraction from the COVID crisis was the agreement of the new programme for government in June of this year. And Mercy Law, together with colleagues from Home for Good, were encouraged to see a commitment in that programme for a referendum on housing. And we were subsequently most encouraged to hear the Minister himself confirm that the commitment was to a referendum on the right to housing. We very much look forward to supporting your work on this important commitment. And just to conclude with some thank yous, I want to say a huge thank you to folks, Danielle, Nuala and Shona. Your professionalism and commitment and compassion was so evident in 2019, but it has really shone in the last 6 months. This being National Volunteer Week, I want to say a huge thank you to our volunteers, solicitors, Ger and Aoife. We so appreciate your expert input, to our fantastic interns and our volunteer administrators, Kathleen and Katrina, and a warm welcome to our new befrienders. Also to say, as Helena did, to echo our sincere thanks to our excellent barristers, we're really very privileged to work with, and to our auditors who very generously provide their services pro bono. Particular thanks to our colleagues at Sophia Housing who host us in our office and are always a rock of support to the organisation. The organisation itself is guided and led with enormous heart and professionalism by our chair, Helena O'Donoghue, and by our board of directors. So many thanks to each of you for your excellent judgment and consistent support. Our funders are the ones who enable all of this work, and we're immensely grateful to you for your generous support. I'd like to say particular thanks to the Sisters of Mercy, the Archdiocese of Dublin, and to colleagues at Mason, Hayes and Curran, all of whom have supported the organisation over a number of years, and for this we are most appreciative. You will see a very kind testimonial from our colleagues at Mason, Hayes and Curran included in our report, and we're very encouraged by your recognition that our service is invaluable and in many instances life-changing. Finally, of course, a thank you to our clients who are at the heart of everything we do. One client is quoted in our report, and she said of her experience of working with Mercy Law, "They do not treat you like an outsider, but like a human being." This, I believe, sums up Mercy Law's approach in every sense. So I'm now delighted to introduce Minister Darragh O'Brien and to invite him to formally launch the report. The Minister comes from Malahide and has long and extensive experience as a public representative at both local and national level. He was first elected to public office in 2004 as a local councillor and was elected to Dáil Éireann in 2007. Following a period as a senator, the minister was re-elected to the Dáil in 2016 and was then appointed the main opposition spokesperson on housing from 2018 until his appointment in 2020 as Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage. He has frequently articulated his own support of the rights of individuals, families and communities and sees these as the bedrock of a just society. And we certainly share that vision, Minister. So thanks again for joining us today, and thank you for launching our report. I'll hand over to you
now. Thanks very much, Rebecca, and to Helena. It's a real pleasure to join you here this afternoon. I know a different type of environment than we would be used to, but very important nonetheless, and it's a real honour for me, and I mean that genuinely, to be asked to launch the 2019 report to the Mercy Law and Resource Centre. I have had the pleasure of actually dealing with your organisation for a number of years now on policy areas. I've always found my engagement with you is always constructive, always useful. I've been challenged many times, and that's good, and I know you'll continue to challenge me on that, and we need people working together, but to challenge policy positions too, you know, to get to a stage where we can really make real inroads into the housing situation and crisis that we are in. But I do firstly want to thank all of you, thank your chairperson, Helena, Rebecca, you and your whole team, and Jerry there for the work that you do on behalf of some of our most vulnerable people. I can assure you of this. I have the report here in my log, as they say. I'm looking through the recommendations of that. I'll continue to engage with you. I'll address some of the matters that you raised in your opening remarks as well. But I suppose if I could say that, you know, I'm keenly aware that the work that you do in supporting and advocating for the most vulnerable out there, many of our families who are homeless, new Irish families, immigrant families as well, and indeed in our traveller community. So you've alluded to the programme for government. The provision of increased social, affordable and private housing is a key challenge for me as Housing Minister. And I'm committed to delivering the appropriate response to these major societal challenges. Increasing the supply of social housing is one of the key challenges. And under the programme for government, I'm committed to delivering over 50,000 new social homes within that period. And with that in mind, just one item there is to make sure that we're delivering things faster and quicker and getting permanent housing supply and supports in place. You've mentioned emergency accommodation. All of us want to get to a stage where people have safe and secure homes, be they public or affordable homes indeed. And that's why I've raised the discretionary cap already to empower our local authorities to build more. So up to €6 million now that a local authority can effectively go through one stage to fast track the process to be able to deliver more public housing. And in this year where our construction sector and provision of public housing has been affected obviously by COVID due to the initial shutdown, through my housing delivery task force that I chair every single week, I am putting not gentle pressure, I would like to say, but a lot of pressure on our delivery partners there to make sure we get as close to hitting our housing targets for this year. And I'm pleased to tell you that we're moving in that direction. And with that in mind, I also put out a call to housing, specifically focused for those families and individuals who are longer term and who are for a long period of time experiencing homelessness. So through the housing agency, I've asked each of our local authorities, and I've publicised this, that we would acquire homes this year focused on singles. 70% of our adults who are homeless are single, and there's not enough accommodation for them, frankly, and families. We've about 50 families who you've alluded to one family there who are in emergency accommodation for 3.5 years in a B&B. We've about 50 families, 50 to 60 families in that particular category who are 3 to 4 years homeless because of the housing need has been difficult to meet, larger family homes. And I've also asked the housing agency and our local authorities, who I talk to every single week, to focus on acquiring homes that we can actually house the larger families. It does require us to do something a little bit different into the future, I might say, as well, as when we're designing our new developments. We need to be designing developments for community. And that means not just all, 3-bedroom terrace houses was very welcome. But what it means is that we're designing for community, 1 and 2 bedroom units, larger family units as well. And I've already made that direction as Minister for Housing to the schemes that we will be delivering. So I hope this year, COVID aside, that we will deliver in the region of 11,000 homes, permanent homes this year through build, acquisition and leasing. And also I have a job to do in the budget that's coming up now to ensure that we've enough money to support those who are on HAP tenancies. I've been very vocal about HAP and the use of HAP. It is, as I see, it should be a temporary measure. That's an important measure to support people there. And I've been encouraging our local authorities to use the transfer list, more effectively. So that, and I'm pleased to actually tell you and to report that actually that is happening in many local authorities, that more people are actually exiting, HAP into permanent housing solutions through our transfer list. And that has been a big blockage for many families. And I understand that. People who've been on the housing list a long time and felt that it was a disadvantage for them to move into HAP. So these are policy areas that I'm looking at and that we're making changes on already. I do intend to proceed as well with plans to provide affordable housing, both for purchase and for rental, which has an overall effect on the whole market. We need to be able to provide an affordable housing basis within our housing market, both public and private housing, and that's something that we're working hard on. But I look at the challenges that we face in the 2020 budget. The housing budget for delivery of public homes was 2.63 billion, up $250,000 from 2019. I'll have a bigger ask this year, and part of my job over the next couple of weeks is to work with colleagues in government and indeed with the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach and other ministers to secure the required funding that I need to provide more social homes next year. I believe in public housing and public land. I believe in partnering with our approved housing bodies, many of whom do a wonderful job across this whole country to provide permanent housing solutions. But in the meantime, whilst we're doing that, and I'm confident we can do it, we've got to look at the just under 8,800 people who are actually homeless. And that is something that affects all of us, and I think affects every single family about how we feel our country. We gauge our country and on the basis of how we look after our most vulnerable people. I certainly want to make serious inroads into our homeless crisis at the moment. What I did the very first week I was appointed, I have the very first meeting that I chair each week is the Homeless Task Force meeting, working with partners and working with our local authorities. So very good NGOs that you and I will know in relation to the delivery of permanent housing, and making sure that we're working together to provide additional emergency accommodation in the short term, working on our winter plan already. We do have extra capacity right now, and we've got to be acutely aware of the pandemic that still presents itself in this country. I'm speaking to you here from Dublin, and many of us are. We're obviously into our level 3, which means we've got to restrict our contacts with people. So we've got to make sure that our most vulnerable communities, our homeless communities, are looked after. I had the pleasure of actually some of the supports through shielding and cocooning centres that were set up for our most vulnerable, and the work that health and housing did together during the start of the pandemic. In the programme for government, we're continuing that. The health and the HSE have a major role in working with me as Minister for Housing, in particularly people who have addiction, health issues, and various things like that we need to work together as a group. I chair, in the small bit of spare time that I have, the Regional Drugs and Alcohol Task Force for North Dublin. So I've seen on a personal level some of the benefits of health and housing working together at the start of the pandemic, where we had clients who were, homeless clients who actually came out of the first phase of the pandemic with better health outcomes than they had when they came into it. Wraparound services and support for our people. And that requires the advice that Mercy Law Centre are giving people, as well as actually making sure that people know about their entitlements, right down to medical cards, right down to health treatments and various things. So we can't lose that silver lining on the grey cloud that is COVID. and government are committed to doing that. And in the Customs House here only a few short weeks ago, I held the first bilateral with Minister Stephen Donnelly, specifically on this issue of making sure that we're, one, protecting our homeless community and our vulnerable community through the pandemic, but two, working together in the budget this year for specific provision that the HSE will have in the housing area, and making sure that both departments work together. And that is a really important priority that I'm working on, and that Stephen and government are absolutely committed on. We're also committed, as you know, to expanding Housing First, and Housing First has been a very successful initiative by the previous government, but needs to be expanded further on a more permanent basis. And I'm certainly committed to doing that. So I want to tell you, though, just a couple of final things, and not to detain people, is that working in partnership with Mercy Law and other advocate groups is really important for me, and I need you feeding in. I'm committed to reducing homelessness, and the government wants to eradicate homelessness. Frankly, that's what we want to do. That's never an easy challenge, but they're the people we need to focus on. But there's a multifaceted approach required. We need more social homes. We need more affordable homes. We need to protect tenants' rights and further strengthen them, which I did in the Residential Tenancies Amendment Act 2020. I'll be keeping a very close eye on that too, as to further measures, should they be required. I won't be found wanting in doing that. But I genuinely want to thank you for the honour it is for me to launch the report today. To thank all of you and your volunteers. You mentioned it's volunteering week. It is indeed, and this country would be much the lesser if it were not for all the work of volunteers who work in many different sectors all across this country. It's not something that's unique to Ireland, but it's pretty special, I think. Then when you look at how people have worked together through this pandemic, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you. I will be closely looking at the recommendations that you've brought forward. You mentioned the right to housing. We worked very closely when I was in opposition on that in relation to legislation there, and I thank you for the work that Mercy Law did in it. I'm committed to moving that to the next stage, to establishing our Commission on Housing, which I hope yourselves and others will have an important role in. I've probably spoken for far too long now, so I'm very sorry, but I could speak all day on housing. But I really want to thank you. Thank Helena, thank you, Rebecca, and your team for giving me the honour of launching the report. And I really am looking forward to working with you in my tenure as Housing Minister. I intend to make a difference. This government intends to make a difference in this area. It is a problem and a challenge, housing, absolutely, but it's one that's resolvable. It's finite, it is resolvable, and we have the wherewithal as a people and as a government and as a society to actually tackle this head on and to build on progress that has been made over the last few years, but to expedite that further. So listen, thanks again. I really appreciate the honour that you've given me today to launch the report.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Rebecca.
Many thanks, Minister, and we're very much looking forward to working with you and to supporting your work, particularly on the right to housing and some of those aspects on homelessness. I'll pass now to Professor Jerry White, who's on our board, who'll just say a few words, just to reflect on your words there, Minister.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Minister. I mean, on behalf of the board of the Mercy Law Resource Centre, I would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to launch our 2019 annual report. We know from our engagement with the Minister when he was in opposition that he is very anxious to solve the very serious housing crisis in our society, and we wish him well in his endeavours in that regard as Minister. Since its inception in 2009, Mercy Law Resource Centre has witnessed a significant increase in the number of homeless families and children seeking its service. And during that time, increasing numbers of Irish people have also had to rely on the rental market for accommodation, reflecting the difficulty that young people in particular are experiencing in accessing a home today. Now, the most obvious solution to this crisis is to build sufficient new accommodation to meet demand. As a law centre, Mercy Law Centre plays an important supportive role in relation to this effort. Most obviously, through our work with our own clients, the more than 1,600 individuals and families that we assisted last year, we can address their accommodation needs. But we also support other people who are caught up in this crisis. Through our work, our publications, our annual reports, we help to put a human face on the arid statistics of homelessness. We also support efforts to keep this issue on the political agenda, and we hope that our work also generates social solidarity on the part of the wider society with those who are homeless or threatened with homelessness. Our work could be more effective, however, if Irish law recognised a right to housing, and we are greatly heartened by the commitment included in the programme for government to hold a referendum on the right to housing during the lifetime of this government. At present, in the absence of such a right, judges have an extremely limited role in overseeing decisions of local authorities and applications for accommodation. Yet experience in other contexts has shown that judicial scrutiny of administrative decisions can contribute to the solution of serious social problems. 25 years ago, certain children in state care faced an accommodation crisis of a different nature, when the absence of appropriate accommodation meant that children with personality disorders, with mental health difficulties, with addiction problems, sometimes found themselves being housed in Garda stations, in adult psychiatric wards, and even on a number of occasions in prisons because of the failure of state policy adequately to look after them. But a series of High Court cases in the mid to late 1990s enforcing the statutory and the constitutional rights of these children highlighted this failure of the state adequately to protect this cohort of children, and generated a political response such that by July 2007, Mr. Justice McMenamin was able to record that in the previous 6 months, there had been no situation where the courts were unable to make a child care order because of the absence of appropriate accommodation. The political response to the problem highlighted by the litigation generated the resources and solved that particular problem. Now, Mercy Law Resource Centre believes that effective judicial oversight of the decisions of housing authorities can also play an important role in solving our current housing crisis, particularly insofar as it affects children. As I've said earlier, the primary solution to this crisis remains the provision of sufficient housing, and that is fundamentally a political matter. But constitutional protection of the right to housing will underpin the key role of the state in providing social housing for those unable to access accommodation through the market, and will enable lawyers like the Mercy Law team to ensure that the right is properly implemented in individual cases. So, in conclusion, I would like to reiterate the board's thanks to the Minister for launching our annual report, and to wish him every success as he grapples with the serious housing crisis in our society.
Helena now will wrap up. I think she's just having difficulties coming on for us. Oh, she is, great.
Okay, thank you very much, Jerry. We appreciate very much the overview that you've given there from a perspective of law and perspective of the experience of law in recent years. And I think it is very apropos at this time where the Minister has outlined a very broad programme, a great programme, which will hopefully bring a lot of what we experience and have concerns about to a different place, and that we will have a better world and a better situation for people who are vulnerable or for some reason or another cannot access just a basic place to have home and to be at home, to flourish and to grow. And I'd add my appreciation to Jerry's and to Rebecca's, Minister, for your encouragement of us and for your engagement with us in various ways before now, but also ahead. in anticipation, because it is really true that the voluntary sector plays a special and an important role in a state's evolution of services, because often it is at the voluntary sector that the raw edge is noticed, or the hidden aspects are discovered, and the voluntary sector can play a very important part in bringing something to the sight, as it were, of ourselves as a society and as governments, and as providers of the basic of what society and each citizen needs. So I appreciate very much your contribution to us today, Minister, for launching our report, for enunciating the picture from a government perspective. And we understand so well everybody's situation has its limitations, but we appreciate your commitment to forwarding and promoting, particularly now, so that the situation can improve for vulnerable people that we meet every day of the year. I also want to thank Rebecca for her very full and I think very insightful overview of the service and of the immediacy of the service to the lives of people who are in distress or even in desperation. And I would like to invite all those who are with us on the Zoom to read the report, which is now in hard copy, but it's also on the web. And I think that not only will it be, I think, very informative and encouraging, but I think it will also bring an aspect of we can all help in some way to make a better society around us. I think the point that Jerry mentioned about developing our sense of solidarity together as communities and as authorities and as voluntary organizations, we all, society and the world belongs to us all. So we must enable those who are fragile or those who have had unfair experiences to be able to find a pathway out of that. And so Mercy Law hopes to continue to do that with commitment and with skill, and with the help of all of those who support us in so very many ways. With that, I want to say thank you to all who joined us. As I say, some 71 people. Some people have sent us some comments. We're sorry our method doesn't provide us with a way of having interchange by way of questions and so on. But we hope that you enjoyed this particular occasion and the launch of our annual report, and that you will find ways yourself perhaps to support Mercy Law, but also the other organizations that we are in partnership with. And I join with the thank you to all of those who've helped us, and particularly I would like to mention Sophia, because I think that Mercy Law and Sophia are very closely two different kinds of organizations and two different focus, but about the same, and we are partners together in the same building, as it were. So thank you to everybody. Have a good day and read the report. And if you can do anything that helps in any way the work of Mercy Law Resource Centre, we would appreciate it so much. Thank you again, and God bless.